in a world where we're constantly being told, and then reminded over and over again that we're divided, there's a very special man here who walks his talk and has traveled around the world gathering information and, you know, practicing what he preaches, and that's trying to find ways to bring people together. So I believe that he's got some information that's going to be very special to share with us tonight. And I'm looking much forward to hearing what you have to say. Without further ado, I'd like to ask our speaker, Shariff Abdullah, to come up and join us.
Well, good evening. Oh, come on.
Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, just make sure that you are actually alive and have a heartbeat here. What I would like to do is if we can do like a really quick, maybe 2-minute meditation, just to make sure that we get ourselves in sync here, and I can get another level of feeling for who's in the room. If you are so inclined, you can close your eyes, and if you're so inclined, you can square your body, feet on the floor. And let's take a deep breath together. And then exhale. Another one in. And exhale. And we can come back to center. And we're starting off with a problem. And the problem is there's way more that I would like to share with you than we have time for. And so I've been in California for about a week now, working in Sacramento. And so I did two 3-hour presentations in Sacramento. I'm going to try to take all that information and smush it into an hour. So part of that involves me speed talking, and so I will do so. So let's get started. On the everybody can see this screen. Okay. Nice screen. I think I'm going to stick that in my luggage and take it with me. If we're interested in this, I can give you access to it by putting it on my website and putting the presentation on my website. But I'm not sure I will or not. So if you want to take notes, you're also free to do so. It's being recorded, so that recording will be available in some way, shape, or form. If we have your email address, you'll get it, or you'll get access to it. And Sergio's nodding, so that means that this is actually going to happen. On that back table there are books, and I'm going to be quoting from them tonight. And I would really like it if you could lighten my luggage on the trip back tomorrow. So feel free to buy as many copies as you wish. And you'll see on the back table a yellow book entitled Be More Silent. And that's a book that I put together as a gift to give away to those who are interested in my journey and interested in the journey I've taken with Rumi. And so if you feel moved, take a copy with you. It was really, I was speaking, the group I was speaking to in Sacramento, there's 150 people, and I only had 20 copies of the book. And so I said, you will know if you are moved to get this book, if you are the one to have the book. So self-center, like just don't say, I want one because everybody else is grabbing one. So a person approached the table and took one of the books, and I really felt that this is this is just not a Rumi guy. I don't know what I was thinking, why did you take the book? And about 5 minutes later, I heard him saying to another guy, um, I I know that this is your kind of book, and I got this for you. So it turned into a double gift, which was which was really cool. Okay, so we're going to talk about something tonight, but I have to set the stage for you. And setting the stage is talking about the concept of worldview or the concept of paradigm. What I'm going to be offering to you is a new worldview, a new way to see and interact with the world. Many times people make an assumption that they know how they have an idea of what I'm talking about because I'm black and was raised in Camden, New Jersey. So I know what he's going to talk about. Or they heard that I've been to law school. Oh, I know what he's going to talk about. Or I've been traveling internationally. Oh, I know what he's going to talk about. And so what I'm offering to you is to like relax and let go of your notions about how you think the world works and be open to another way of looking at it. How many of you saw the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? And in the movie, they were talking about the Native Americans who could not see Columbus's ships. They weren't stupid. They weren't dumb. They weren't bad. They weren't evil. They were operating from a worldview that did not contain human structures that large. Okay? There's another way of looking at this, and this is the people who live in the rainforest were being studied by these anthropologists. And at one point, the anthropologists took them out to the end of the rainforest where the start of this broad savanna. And off in the distance, there were elephants walking. And the anthropologist asked them, what's your word for these animals, for these beings? And they gave a word that meant beetles. Because to them, this broad savanna where you could see miles and miles away was just a wall 20 feet away. And crawling on the wall were these little tiny things like beetles. They had no idea that a distance longer than 50 feet existed. That's the furthest extent their vision had ever gone was 50 feet. And they weren't wrong. They weren't bad. They weren't stupid. They weren't crazy. They were just operating from a different worldview. Their worldview was completely compatible with their life. Where in the rainforest, the furthest distance you'd ever have to see is 50 feet. We're operating with a series of worldviews. So if I asked you the question, where does the sun rise? You'll give me an answer, like right now. Point to sunrise. Okay, y'all are just all over the place, as usual. I don't think there's any consistent direction you pointed in. I think I saw a couple that were pointing kind of in this direction. But how you see sunrise depends on your worldview. When I asked you where sunrise was, most of you gave the natural response, a sensory response. This is what the world looks like according to our senses. It looks like, whatever direction it is, I'm guessing that way too, that there's this big yellow ball that comes up over the horizon, swings over your head, and sets over there. There's another way of looking at it, and that is sun-centric. This is the Galilean view. Up until the time of Galileo and Giordano Bruno, the people believed that the sun physically rose there and traveled around the Earth. The Earth was the center of the known universe. Galileo said, no, that's not it. The Earth is actually going around the sun. For saying that, he was punished by the church. When Giordano Bruno said it, he was killed by the church. He was turned into papal barbecue for saying something that each and every one of you knows. Now, it's not when people are willing to defend an erroneous worldview to their deaths. People are willing to defend an erroneous worldview to the death of someone else. So the Pope at the time had no problem in burning Giordano Bruno at the stake for saying something that each and every one of you knows right now, that we teach our children. At one point in time, while Galileo was undergoing the Inquisition, the chief inquisitor, Galileo was talking to the chief inquisitor and said, what would happen if you walk across the room and look through my telescope and see the things that I'm telling you about? The inquisitor said, oh, that's really simple. It would prove that you had enchanted me. You cast a spell on me to get me to believe your completely insane ideas that Earth's revolving around suns. Well, that's not the end of the story of worldview. There's another worldview, and that's the Newtonian worldview. This is the worldview that says that everything is based on gravity, on all these massive objects pulling on each other. And Newton was the person who gave us a theory about something that every being on this planet experiences. It doesn't matter that you experience it. There was no theory for gravity until Newton. And he actually developed the science, the mathematics, the calculus to explain how these objects were moving around. And for those of us who took calculus in high school, we are so happy that he did so. Yes, that was a joke. Then there's the relativistic worldview, that none of this is, the sun's not coming up and going down, it's not sun-centric, it's not even gravity-centric, that we're talking about the warping of space-time, and that these objects that are rolling around in these warped space fields are creating a relativistic physics. And that's not the end of the picture either. There's the quantum view. And the quantum view is, all of this is the dance of subatomic particles, and you don't really know what's going on, and you don't have an idea of where these particles are located, and they're entwined in these really weird ways. And then I would suggest to you that there's one more way of looking at it. And this is the inclusive or the noetic or the consciousness worldview. And this is a worldview that says it's all about consciousness. And the people who are the leading lights of that worldview would include someone like Edgar Mitchell, would include someone like Dean Radin, would include Rupert Sheldrake, and we'll talk about him in a few slides, and might include me. I am not a scientific researcher. I am the person who is trying to make this research practical. No one would have paid a bit of attention to these wild ideas of this guy named Albert Einstein if they hadn't invented the atomic bomb. It was when the ideas had a practical and a very deadly application, Einstein becomes one of the most famous human beings on the planet. And I have a story to tell you about Einstein, if we have time later on tonight, which is going to give me incentive to try to get through this stuff. So, all of these points of view are valid. None of them are the people who believe them are not wrong, bad, crazy. what they are is more or less appropriate to what they're looking at. So if I walk into your house or your apartment and I'm carrying a plant and the plant needs sun, and I say to you, which way does the sun rise? The last thing I want from you is an explanation of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Okay? It doesn't make any sense. It's like, oh, put the plant over there because that's where the sun comes up. So, all of these points of view are valid in context. All of them depend on your frame of reference. So the thing I'm trying to change for us is our frame of reference. So I'm going to start by giving you my conclusions, and then I'm going to try to get you to the conclusions. And depending on what you know already, I can skip through some stuff. So I'm going to be asking you if you know about X or know about Y or know about Z. Okay, so my conclusions in the concept of radical inclusivity is that all is alive. And when I mean all of us. I mean all of the living beings in this room. I mean this piece of wood, this table, the electrons that are bouncing off of the screen into your eyes. The whole thing is alive. Whether you recognize the life or not, whether you honor the life or not, it doesn't make it any more or less alive. All of it is conscious. Beings have forms of consciousness that we don't share, that are beyond the ways that we can think. But it doesn't mean that they're not conscious. All of it is connected, and it's connected in ways that we can't see or feel, but that doesn't mean the connections are not there. The mind is all pervasive, and it's all pervasive because it's not just my mind. You've been taught that my mind is here, your mind is there, each one of us has a mind. That's a way of looking at it. I'm trying to suggest to you there's another way of looking at it, and that is part of my mind is here. And I don't mean here, I mean here. And part of my mind is here, and part of my mind is here. And I'm actually operating with neurons of people who are 200 miles, 2,000 miles away. At this level of consciousness, there's no such thing as distance. Distance is the illusion of 3D reality, which is valid. 3D definitely works. So consciousness is a universal, and it's a universal truth, not just for humans. It's a universal truth for all beings. And the laws of physics bend toward consciousness. So when we start looking at the levels of consciousness, we can see that consciousness is stronger than the laws of physics. How many of you, I'm not ready to get there yet. Okay, so let's first do the Kessler experiment. How many of you know Arthur Kessler and the heat lamp experiments? 2, which means all the rest of you are going to find out right now. Okay, Arthur Kessler wrote a bunch of books on coincidence and chance. And we all know what chance is. I flip a coin, it lands on the floor, it's going to land either heads or tails, unless it's one of my coins, which they will land on their sides. I have pictures. It throws off your averages. You can't do standard deviations like that. But for most people, a coin will land on face up or face down. If you flip it another time, you have a 50-50 chance of it being heads or tails. You flip it 10,000 times, and it starts approximating 50-50. So if you flip it 10,000 times, it might be heads 5,002 times and tails 4,998 times, but it will be within these laws that we call standard deviations. We know the standard deviation for flipping a coin. We know how that operates. Kessler created an object called a random number generator. This is in the days before computers. And all it would do is generate a random number. And he looked to see whether the number it generated was even or odd. If you run it through 10,000 cycles, what would you expect? Half the numbers would be even, half the numbers would be odd. Okay? It could be 5,002 evens and 4,998 odds, but it'd be pretty much even. So you're all with me. He attached the random number generator to a heat lamp and ran it through 10,000 numbers. The heat lamp, so if the number was even, the light would come on. If the number was odd, the light would go off. That's how he programmed the light. Run it through 10,000 numbers. The lamp is on half the time, the lamp is off half the time. Everybody's nodding. You take a tray of cute little fuzzy baby chickens, put them in front of the heat lamp, run it through 10,000 numbers. The heat lamp stays on. Way outside the realm of chance. The heat lamp will stay on 70% of the time, 80% of the time. And it's because the random number generator is generating that many even numbers. Take the baby chickens away. Run it through 10,000 more numbers. It's back to 50-50. So this means baby chickens are a lot smarter than you give them credit for. What do I have to do to get a laugh out of these folks? Ha ha ha.
Well, it's Petaluma, and we're in.
Okay, right. That was the Ion's laugh. Okay, I got you now. Okay. Or something else is going on. Kessler, being a good scientist, said, I'm getting an effect, but I don't know what the effect is. So he does a double-blind experiment. He gets a tray of fertile eggs that are about to hatch. He then gets a tray of hard-boiled eggs, which are very difficult to hatch. I don't know if you've ever tried it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And he runs. And he then has a researcher who doesn't know which tray is which. He knows tray A, tray B. Puts nothing in front of the heat lamp. The heat lamp generates numbers in the 50-50 range. You put the hard-boiled eggs in front of the heat lamp, it stays 50-50. You put the fertile eggs in front of the heat lamp stays on. Way outside the realm of chance. Which means fertile eggs are a lot smarter than you give them credit for. Or it means that the laws of physics bend toward consciousness. Those chickens wanted to stay warm. Those eggs wanted to stay warm. And neither the chickens nor the eggs knew anything about standard deviations. It didn't care anything about chance. We want the light to stay on. Okay? Similar things happen with Sheldrake's, Rupert Sheldrake's experiments. Rupert Sheldrake? Okay. Yes, Rupert Sheldrake. No, Rupert Sheldrake. Okay. So one of his Sheldrake's experiments are dogs that know when their owners are coming home. How many of you have dogs? How many of the dogs are waiting at the door when you come home? What are the standard theories given why the dogs are there and are waiting?
50%.
Huh?
Percent. They have a 6th
sense. I don't know what
Oh,
I'm saying.
well, that's the Sheldrakean theory.
Probably
The
50-50.
standard theory is, oh, you go home the same time, the dog is entrained to the time. You go home at the, using the same car, and the dog is entrained to the sound of the car. The Sheldrake, being a scientist, said, let's test this. So he got, this was in London, he had a bunch of people who had flexible work schedules, they could go home whenever they wanted to. And at home, he had, they agreed to have 2 cameras set up. One of the cameras is set at the front door where the dog would stand if he's waiting for you. And the other in the living room on the sofa where the dog is sitting there smoking cigarettes and watching daytime soap opera. What do you think dogs do when you're not really there? And so the researcher at a given point in time would say to the person, I want you to not intend to go home. I want you to get in your car and follow our directions of how to drive. And the dog is sitting on the sofa. And they will tell them, turn right here, turn left here, and they will drive them in their own car right past their front door, and the dog doesn't move off the sofa. So they're not reacting to the sound of the car. Drive them a mile away, and then we'll say to the person, I want you to intend to go home, and to go home. Dog gets up off the sofa and walks through the door. The other part of the experiment, in terms of entraining the person to, like the dog is used to you coming home at 5 o'clock, anytime between 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock, the researcher would call the person up and say, right now, I want you to intend to go home, and I want you to go home. And as soon as the person hangs up the phone, 10 miles away, the dog gets up off the sofa and walks to the front door. So the connection is there.
I just want to say, this is true for cats too.
Oh,
It's not just dogs, because I know.
no.
I've
Sheldrake
tested it.
said no. He said that it's true that you have this relationship to your cat, but the cats show up because they might get some food out of you. The cats are scheming, like, what am I going to get out of this? Okay. So Rupert Sheldrake had a different experiment for cats. Cat owners say regularly report that when it's time to go to the vet, they can't find their cat.
Oh, God, yeah, no, you can't, yeah. I couldn't think. I'd have to shift my thoughts. And, yeah.
So
They're very smart.
So people would actually make the vet appointments at work so the cat wouldn't overhear them, okay? And still can't find the cat, okay? So Sheldrake did research. He took research on 50 vets in London. So he called all 50 of them and asked, do cat owners miss their appointments at a higher level or higher frequency than dog owners? 49 of the 50 say cat owners almost never make their appointments. The 50th one said, we don't even take appointments for cats. He said, we tell folks, if you can find the cat, just bring them in, So the bond is there, but it shows up in a different kind of way with those beings. Moving faster, parrots, because parrots can vocalize, they can say what's on their minds. And Sheldrake in this book shows that the parrots can actually read your dreams. So if you have a dream that has a blue flower in it, and the next morning your parrot is saying blue flower, and that's pretty creepy. Okay. So let's talk about the pH experiment. Back to chicks. We know that baby chickens, like many fowls, bond to the first thing they see moving. And so in this experiment, they take a red balloon and they move it in front of the chicks, and the chicks are bonding to the balloon. They put the red balloon on a little cart, and the cart has two randomizers on it. So the one randomizer spins the cart in a completely arbitrary direction, and the second randomizer makes it move forward some distance, and then it spins again and goes in another direction, spins again and goes in another direction. So, how many of you know about this experiment? Yeah, this is cool stuff. Okay, so when they did that, this is the first pattern. So the cart starts here, and just kind of imagine about a little cloud of baby chickens around. Then it goes here, 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 here. There is no pattern that you can perceive in how this works, right? Okay. Then the researchers took all the baby chickens and put them in a cage over here and put a glass here so that the chickens can see Mom, the red balloon, but they can't get to her. Okay? So they put the balloon back into the center of the room. Same rules. One randomizer spins it, another randomizer makes it move forward some distance. And then they run it, and then they get this pattern. Yes? You get it? You don't get it?
I get it.
I don't get it.
Oh. The red balloon's moving over here, near their chicks.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
And it's not moving over here where there are no chicks.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay? Which means those baby chicks are smart.
Maybe the red balloon.
The red balloon
Well-
is smart.
The red balloon needs its babies, that's right. You know, how often does a red balloon get to be a mommy? So, the difference between these two is the difference of consciousness, although we don't understand the issue of consciousness. And then we get to mirror neurons. How many of you know about mirror neurons? Mirror neurons, going once, Gary. Actually, we're not going to skip mirror neurons. Those who know, great, and those who don't, okay. Because I'd rather get to murdering shrimp.
I know about that.
Huh? You're yeah, I'm not talking about shrimp scampi. I'm talking about these research shrimp. These are brine shrimp, so they are breeding and growing in salty water. And what happens when you take brine shrimp and put them in distilled water is that they burn. They basically burn and explode. It's a very awful, horrible death. So researchers had a big tank of shrimp, and they would scoop some of the shrimp out, and they put them in brine water, and they'd watch these reactions as all the shrimp are writhing in agony as they're dissolving and exploding. But the thing that they saw was that while these shrimp over here in the distilled water are acting that way, all the shrimp in the big tank are acting that way also. Okay? So they're still safely in the brine, but they're acting like that you put them in what in effect to a shrimp is boiling water. Take that one step further, though. That experiment only works when a human being is dropping the shrimp in the brine, in the distilled water. If you set up a mechanism, no human beings in the room, the mechanism at some point in time just reaches in, scoops out some shrimp, carries it over to the distilled water and drops the shrimp in. The shrimp in the distilled water go crazy, they're in pain, etc. But the shrimp in the big tank don't react. There's something about the medium of human consciousness that makes that happen. What is happening? I don't know, but there needs to be us seeing it to make the connection between these shrimp in this tank and these shrimp over here. Yes.
So are you saying that there's, in essence, a lever that turns entanglement on or off when intention is present?
I'm not, no, I'm not saying that.
That's what it sounds
Sounded good, but I'm not saying that, okay? I'm saying that the
Because
connection.
That's entanglement, what you're talking about, right?
I don't know, no, I don't know if it is or not. I'm not saying it's not entanglement. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying there's a mechanism going on, and what the mechanism for some reason needs a human to observe it in order for the link to be made. I'm not sure that it's classic entanglement, because if it were entanglement, let's say the entanglement would be the shrimp that get pulled out are still connected to the shrimp that are.
That's what I'm saying. So that something is turning it off with intention, right? If the mechanism is now a machine and that's no longer happening, entanglement isn't happening, there's consciousness, the lever that turns it on or off.
But so if it's entanglement, then human consciousness could be the lever that's turning it on and off, on the one hand, or on the other hand, it may not be entanglement.
Got it. Thank you.
It may be that we are the lights that are in the room, and the shrimp can see themselves a different way when we're in the room versus when we're not in the room. It would be really interesting to see what would happen if you put a dog in the room and see if the two tanks of shrimp would interact. I would like to see that experiment. Yeah, yeah.
My sense was the shrimp in the brine are just so outraged that a human would do such a thing that they.
they're trying to figure out how to strike back. It's a terrible experiment. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
traumatic.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that
Yeah.
Do you know about the plant experiment where shrimp were murdered?
No.
Because
Now I
that's-
do know the plant experiment where plants are murdered. When you hurt a plant, other plants will react. But tell us about.
So it's similar to this.
Mhm.
It's taken the human, there is a human element and a non-human element, and same scenario. The shrimp react when, the plant reacts when shrimp are hurt, when a human is there. But if you take the human out and you do a random dump the shrimp in a boiling pot of water and they die and the plant is there in the room, it reacts the same as if the human is there.
Let me make sure I understand this. So, we're taking the big pot of shrimp away. So there's a plant in the room hooked up to sensing devices, and then the shrimp. When the shrimp are murdered,
Right.
the plant reacts
Yes.
with the human in the room.
Yes.
When a human leaves the room, and there's an automatic mechanism that then dumps and murders the shrimp,
Right.
the plant still reacts.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm trying to figure out how that works in terms of what you were saying.
And that's
And we're-
from the book titled Secret Life of the Plant.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to think about that.
they've shown that at Damanure, that if you've seen those, where the plants can sing, they learn to sing, and then the plants can teach other plants to sing. that hadn't learned
Yeah.
yet. That's very interesting.
Yes, yeah, and this whole learning thing is just really, really seriously interesting. How do beings learn, and how are some of our more intelligent beings learning how to use tools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Okay.
Sergio is saying entanglement is observed in quantum scale, but not proven yet in macro scale.
True. I think it's only a matter of time, though, when we figure out how to look at it on the macro scale. I mean, I think that the quantum world, all of well, I'm about to talk about it. I think the next slides, we'll be talking about that. But yeah, so I think that all of the elements of the quantum world are available to us in this world if we know how to do it, okay, and we know how to actually look for it. And I'm gonna talk more about that in 1 second here. So, some years ago, I went on a journey. The journey took me to the Himalayas, took me to a cave on the Doak River at the 15,000 foot level. No other human beings around me for 12 miles in any direction. And if you've ever, I mean, that is like profoundly alone. No such thing as an electromagnetic signal getting anywhere. They don't bother beaming satellite images down in regions like that. I went there looking for something very specific, and I got something that I wasn't looking for. I went looking for the roots of sacred civilization, meaning I went looking for a device, something that would give human beings the powers that the ancients had, that we've heard about, specifically the powers to move the megalithic stones like Stonehenge, Göbekli Tepe, Sasahumai, whatever it is in Peru. It has a better name than that. And I thought there would be an implement, like a song you sing or some material that you've got, and it would make the stones move. And what I got was different than that. What I was told in the cave, this is a revelatory download. What I was told in the cave was that the latent powers existed back then. The latent powers still exist. They exist in each and every human being right now. But they cannot be accessed or can't be accessed reliably as long as the person thinks of themselves as an individual. It's only when the group mind is activated that you get the latent powers. And it told me very specifically what these latent powers are, which I'm going to tell you on this slide. So the 5 latent powers, there may be 20 latent powers, but the 5 that I'm focusing on. Collective telepathy, and I'll tell you what each one of these means. Collective telepathy and knowing, spatial powers, temporal powers, communication powers, and bodily powers. Going through this really quickly because I really want to get to the project stuff. So in terms of collective telepathy and knowing, this to me is the first and the greatest of all of the powers. This is that human beings can access the knowing capacity of any other human being and all other species. We can know what's going on this planet, wherever we are. That knowledge is not restricted by distance, it's not restricted by time, it's also not restricted by species. The ancient people, the ancient whole people, I call us the holons. We're the solons. We're the ones that believe we're solo. Ancient holons did not live in fear of scarcity. They knew how to talk to the life field and could attract the food, could attract the other beings. They would actually become one with their food. The people in my region, in the Portland, the Oregon area, would talk about the salmon as their brothers. Now, when we listen to that, we're hearing, "Oh, that's really quaint. That's really nice. You know, you people think that you're brothers with a fish, and you are." We know that the ancient navigators, the Polynesians, would go from one island to another island, to an island they had never been in, an island on the other side of the horizon. They cannot see the island. And they would get a ship. They would only put enough food as it took to get them to that island. They would go straight to the island. They're not wandering around. And when we of this consciousness see that, we start looking for reasons why that happens. And National Geographic did this huge article on, well, they're reading the clouds, and the clouds are telling them there's an island over there. And that's because the National Geographic people went to them and said, well, is it the clouds telling you an island over there? And said, yeah, clouds. And well, how about the patterns of the water? Are you looking at the wave patterns and wave? Yeah, the waves. And they'll say yes to any of that because all of it feeds into the notion of who they are. They just know it. How many of you have had the experience of knowing something that was not objectively provable? Just about everybody, okay? How do animals know when there's going to be an earthquake, when there's going to be some cataclysmic event? Now, all the researchers say, oh, they have sensing organs that can sense shifts in the electromagnetic field, da-da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, yeah, that may be true, but the bottom line is they know. I spent a lot of time in Sri Lanka, and during the bad tsunami they had over there, I think it was 2005, the elephants are used for heavy lifting. They're like living bulldozers for them. And they keep the elephants chained up, although the elephants can snap their chains whenever they want to. And at a given point on the day of the tsunami, all of the tame elephants snapped their chains and started running up the hills. And their humans were smart enough to say, I think we better follow them. And as the elephants were going up the hill, they were picking up humans and putting them on their backs. You know, and when they got to the top of the hill, they just stopped, and everybody's like, "What?" And then you could see the wave coming in, and they stopped at the place where the wave. They stopped at the place at the height of the wave, and how do you know? That's this part here. It's called collective telepathy and knowing. So this includes group telepathy, group knowing, consciousness, mental influencing, being able to shift your consciousness and shift the consciousness of others, consciousness transferring. I can transfer my consciousness to that of the salmon. I can transfer my consciousness to the consciousness of the caribou. I can transfer my consciousness to the consciousness of the wolf. And I can know things from that position. And I can communicate with others regarding, through this transcendent state that is beyond our 3D reality. Okay, I'm gonna have to move faster. Spatial powers means our ability to affect actions at a distance. Now, you remember Einstein referred to quantum mechanics as spooky action at a distance. He kept saying, this isn't possible. Guess what? It is. One of the spatial powers is transportation, that I can move from one location to another either at very great speed or without any time interval. I stop being here, I start being in Portland, Oregon, and I really wish I could do that because I don't want to fly back tomorrow. Help me work on that one. The other is navigation. I just talked about that, able to cross vast distances, knowing where the other direction is, only packing enough food to get to that island. The third is translocation, putting your consciousness in a different location or in a different position than in your body. The first thing is that you can put your consciousness in different places in your body. You can put your consciousness right here in your hand. And you can look at the world and look back at yourself from this point of view of consciousness. Your consciousness can actually leave your body. And how many of you have had an out-of-body experience? Okay. And how many have heard about out-of-body experiences? And you can transfer that position from your body into the body of another. And I think that this is what happens with intense lovemaking, that your consciousnesses actually transfer. Bilocation is being in two or more distinct locations at the same time. Again, this is proven in quantum mechanics, and it's also proven by our ancients. They talked about being in two or more places regularly. You know, they talk about going from one mountaintop in the Himalayas to the other mountaintop in a matter of 15 or 20 minutes, when if you were actually walking the distance, it would take you days and days. Then the last one, well, not the last one, object moving and manipulation. And for example, cutting, lifting, and setting the monolithic stones of the pyramid, of Göbekli Tepe, etc. And then object sensing, to be able to see or know objects from a distance. And for some reason, this is the only one of these great powers that ION seems to be doing research on. I think the other ones are, I think all of it is very interesting, and I think that we shouldn't focus just on one of these. I would like us to focus on things that actually make a difference in our lives. Okay, spatial powers. And locating food sources is another of the spatial powers. How many of you read the book Mutant Message Down Under? When the community needed food, they would just stop, hold their hands out. Okay, the gazelle's 2 miles that way, you know, and then they go over that way and there's the gazelle. Why not? And the last one is weather control. And this is something that groups talk about being able to do, to being able to influence the weather. Yes?
Which do you think is most practical for practicing inclusivity?
All of them. Really.
Which would you study first?
All of them. I've broken these down to kind of like put them in categories, but it's all the same thing.
Right.
It's just one thing,
Yeah.
you know. And I'll tell you something really cool about this. But let me go through the two more, and then I'll tell you something really cool. So the temporal powers are time shifting, being able to speed up time, being able to slow down time. How many of you have had an experience of time simply going faster or simply going slower? Okay. Have any of you had an experience of time stopping altogether? I have for brief intervals, which is really interesting. being able to shift to an alternate narrative, an alternate story, being able to shift to an alternate reality. What I mean by this is I'm living a story right now. I've already told you large parts of my story. I live in Portland, Oregon. I travel around the world. I was in Sacramento recently, etc. But there are other parts. That's all a story. I can shift that story to another story, to another alternate universe, where instead of going to the Clark University that's in Massachusetts, I went to the Clark University that's in Atlanta. Okay, I can, and we do that all the time. When you have when people say, I had a major life-changing event, what you actually mean is something happened that caused me to shift to another story, another narrative. And we can shift back and forth. And if we have another 2 or 3 hours, I can talk more about that. And then there's temporal forecasting, oracles, and fortune telling. How many of you have worked with someone who is using a temporal forecasting method to look into your own immediate future? How many of them have been accurate? Okay. Communication powers. Having non-verbal communication with other aspects of your own self. That's a pretty heavy. Actually, I might start there. If you can't talk to yourself, who can you talk to? Yeah, I used to talk to myself, but I got into too many arguments. Nonverbal communication with other human beings. These are beings that may have bodies, and these are beings that may not have bodies. Okay, your ancestors, spirits, etc. Communication with transcendent beings, gods, goddesses, avatars. You can have more than one personality. You can have personalities that are not associated with this particular body. Most of the people who can move objects with their minds, most of the people who can do the spatial, the spatial powers, have to deny it. They cannot accept that they have the power to do that. So they put the power onto somebody else, Aunt Myrtle's ghost. Okay? And they can accept that Aunt Myrtle is doing it, but they can't accept that they themselves have the power to do this. I was doing a number of sacred ceremonies at one time using the plant medicine ayahuasca. How many of you have done ayahuasca that you claim that you wish to claim? And at one point, we're sitting in circle. There's 30 of us or so in the room. Some people had been there for a while, had been working with this healer for a while. Some people were brand new. And at a given point in time, the healer starts singing a song in Shipibo, which is the language of the people who discovered ayahuasca. All 30 of us start singing the same song in Shipibo. Now, I'm sitting in the room, and there are 2 of me. There's the Sharif that's talking to you right now, and then there's this other Sharif. And the Sharif that's talking to you right now was saying to the other Sharif, shut up. You can't sing in Shipibo. You have no idea what this language is. The only language you know is English. You're going to make a fool out of yourself. Just shut up. And then the other Sharif was just simply said, take a deep breath. And what came out was Shipibo. And so, after a few stanzas of this, this Sharif starts laughing and saying, "When was choir practice? I think I missed that." But the next morning, I was talking to one of the new people who was having a profoundly disturbed experience. And you'll excuse my language, but she kept repeating, "How the fuck could I sing that song?" And I was trying to work with her to, she said, "I can accept that you sang a song in a language that you don't know. I cannot accept that I sang that song and I sang the song." I neglected to mention all the men were singing the same notes as the healer was singing. All the women were singing an octave above, and they were singing harmonics. We sounded good, okay? And so what happens when these latent powers are happening to you, and you, the one that's in the room right now, can't accept it? Well, you blame something else. You blame the ayahuasca. You blame Aunt Myrtle's ghost, etc. You can communicate with other earth beings, with other species. You can communicate with beings in your past, in your future, or from other worlds. So people talk about, UFOs and space aliens and stuff like that. It's almost like big deal. It's like, okay, line up. We've got a couple billion species on this planet, and then add some folks from other planets. Okay? It's all about consciousness. So, the last category, and the one I think is the least important, and therefore the one that gets studied the most here, is bodily powers. The ability to change your heart rate, your respiration rate, etc., and the power of prayer. The power to have willful intention at a distance that can produce a tangible result in either an individual's life or the life of a great number of people. And we're going to be talking about that willful intention in another minute or two. I'm sorry, let me see how far down the road we are. Whoops. I guess I shouldn't touch this, should I? Okay, so Max Planck said, "All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter." Max Planck got that from Yoda, okay? In the Star Wars stuff, I hate to say it, but George Lucas got it right. Okay, or Yoda got it right. The force completely surrounds us and is part. I am an individual inside the force, but it also obeys our commands. So we can be intentional with regard to all this stuff. So conclusions are: everything's alive, everything is conscious, it's all connected. Mind is all pervasive, consciousness is universal, and the laws of physics bend toward consciousness. Toward this, I had some of my own conclusions. All beings have consciousness, including humans, and we are not the most intelligent ones on the planet. By any measure of intelligence, whales and dolphins are somewhere between 400 and 4,000 times more intelligent than we are. Yes, I know it's humbling. All beings can share consciousness. If you believe that you can do it, you can do it. If we had time, I'd tell you a bunch of stories about that, but I don't have time. The earlier humans, in my book, Creating a World That Works for All, I talk about them being the keepers. The early humans had abilities that us later humans, the breakers, don't have, simply because the earlier humans did not believe that they were individualized And we believe that my consciousness does not belong to anybody else. So the breaker science is based on individuality, separation, and death. So we're creating a new science, an emergent science that will be based on inclusivity and holistic thinking. So that practicing inclusivity will create and accelerate our collective consciousness or group mind. So the book that I wrote, The Chronicles of the Upheavals, there's only one copy back there. Y'all can fight about it. Maybe I should auction it off. It makes an assumption that humans are that humans make it through the next 100 years, and that is not a safe assumption to make. And so, with that as an assumption, how did we make it? So they put a history together, and the history starts in their past 100 years, but our future starts in 2025. And so how did we get to this point where we are awakening? We're actually awakening our human capacities, our true human capacities. So, all indigenous cultures were part of the first global civilization. We look at all of these different indigenous cultures as, oh, these are all these backwards people running around half naked with loincloths. They can't know as much as I do. I drive a car. I wear clothes. And what we need to recognize is that they're operating from a different level of reality, a different worldview. And that worldview is very valid to where we need to go as a society. Okay, I am going to stop for a couple of questions before I launch into the project that I'll be doing starting in the fall. If you want to take I'll take a few questions.
Well, a couple comments. First of all, I've had a pretty miraculous life full of unbelievable synchronicities that have just absolutely defied what I learned in college, in physics and everything. So I'm really happy to hear.
I'm sorry, you said defied.
Yeah.
I was hoping you weren't saying defined.
No, I mean, for a long time I've been thinking that I've known, I haven't thought, by personal experience, I have known that the laws of physics that I learned in the engineering classes I took are not the pinnacle of reality, that there is some other force that transcends it. And consciousness is as good as any for me. I mean, I had, just really briefly, in my mid-20s, I was a highly rated skeet shooter. I actually had the highest rating in the world. And at that time, I would practice with such earnestness, and one day I just noticed it was beautiful out there, and I forgot my intensity, and the next bird that I called, something changed, and I didn't move the gun. I watched the clay pigeon do this. I watched the gun barrel do this. I watched the clay pigeon go up, the finest shot I've ever made, turned into dust, nothing left of it. Person behind me said, "You stayed with that bird well." And I said, "I didn't do anything at all."
Yes.
And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't know, but if I had the rest of my life to explain it, you wouldn't understand it any more than I do right now."
Yeah.
That changed my life because there was no time delay and I wasn't doing anything. So I threw most of the physics I learned out the window in that moment. And 15 years ago, and this is worth saying because it's absolutely true and it defies conscious reasoning, but it ties into, the tapestry of what you've said ties into a lot of experiences I've had. I could talk about many, but I'll just mention this one other one. And that was, I woke up at a girlfriend's house in Santa Rosa, town north of here a little bit, and she said, "I need a bookcase for this wall." And I said, "What kind of bookcase do you want?" I've been dating her for 3 years. She said, "I won't tell you." "Why not?" She said, "I know you, Risto." She said, "You'll go out and buy me one instead of doing your patent work today." I said, "No, I promise I'll do my patent work. Please tell me." So she said, "I want this high, this wide, and I want it out of solid walnut." Why walnut? Because I have all these pewter objects to put on I said, okay, well, I'm sure, I said this, I'm sure the universe will present one to me someday. I thought at a garage sale or something like that. And then something told me to say, is there anything else you want? And then she described that she wanted these 18-inch size cement blocks with big planks, and she was gonna make this structure to put potted plants of all different sizing. So I said, I'm sure, and I said it with childlike innocence, I'm sure the universe will present that to me as well. I worked till 9 o'clock that evening, did my patent work, ran into my studio apartment, and outside the door of my studio apartment was exactly as she described that she wanted a 6-foot-high, 3-foot-wide walnut bookcase with a note on it, free, help yourself. My jaw dropped, and to the right of that were stacks of those cinder blocks and planks with a note that said, help yourself.
Let me ask a question. How many of you had experiences like this? Okay? It's, yes, this is the way the universe works, okay? I'll tell a very quick story that mirrors your skeet shooting experience. And this happened, there's a Zen center somewhere in the Bay Area, Green Gulch. I was at Green Gulch, okay? And they had an exhibit of Zen archery, okay? And so they had 3 archers. They had the young student, the expert student, and then the master. The way you're supposed to do it, you have this big bow that's really hard to handle, and you have to hold the bow out like this, and then you have to elevate, and then you have to let the arrow go at the right Zen moment. And what's the right Zen moment? That's the thing that you try to learn for the rest of your life, what the Zen moment is. Beginning student was there, and his arms were shaking all over the place because he's trying to master this bow and he hasn't got it. And I was saying I would let the arrow go. I'd said now, and he was a little late. It felt late. Master student gets up, very little quiver on his arms, and he elevates. And I was saying I would let the arrow go now. And when I hit now, he let the arrow go, hit the target downrange. Then the master got up. This little woman, and when she drew the bow, there was no tension on it. It's almost like it was slack. There was not any movement. And when she looked at the target, she turned her head, but her eyes were completely unfocused. She was not looking. When she elevates, her arm just goes up. And I was thinking, okay, I would let the arrow go. And when I got to now, the arrow disappeared. It didn't travel through the air. It just disappeared, and downrange in the target, perfect bullseye, and it went through the target. And I said, okay. They shoot again, same result. And this time I was like, I'm not going to blink when she gets up. And at the Zen moment, the arrow disappears and it reappears downfield, another perfect bullseye, and goes through the target again. And so we all can have those perfect Zen moments in our lives. And then most of us live this other life.
Did you ever read Herrigel's Zen and the Art of Archery?
Yes, I did. A very, very powerful book. Yes.
Well, probably needless to say, I don't know what other people said when they checked in, but I definitely didn't understand where we were headed tonight.
Oh, we're okay.
Oh, maybe you're.
I got 20 more minutes here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here going, okay, why was I sent here tonight? And I just want to name that my daughter has Lyme, And I'm really, just, I know that I'm sitting between these two narratives of like the Lyme doctor and the gravity of it, and this other reality that doesn't, go into the fear and that anything's possible. So I'm taking it in from that place.
Yeah, it's hard, and it's also a challenge when you are recognizing on one hand, the universe is perfect. On the other hand, sometimes that perfection manifests itself in a way that is like, what the hell is going on? You know? Yeah, and we're gonna talk about that in about 2 minutes. One last comment. Yes.
Can I share a Zen moment?
Yes.
I have two angels.
A quick Zen moment. Okay.
Sorry?
A quick Zen moment.
Yes,
Okay.
it will be less than.
Okay.
I had two angels appear in my living room. They took me out of my body and into the future. I was above the planet looking down on it, but I was also feeling everybody on the planet, so I was one with everyone.
Mhm.
And that feeling of oneness it changed my life.
Mhm.
I came back into my body, and they left with, you don't know how big this is gonna get.
Yep.
Since then, I've had a confirming experience, repeating that same feeling in a circle of 16 Quakers. I wasn't looking for it, I didn't demand it, it just happened.
Mhm.
What I got, because I had doubts up until that confirming experience, that this is another Earth, it's somewhere else, it's another dimension. The confirming experience gave me the certainty of, this is here now.
Mhm.
This is us. This is a birth, and it's happening. And all we need to do is focus on it with intention, and it will be.
Yes.
And that's infinitely more powerful than any other kind of consciousness.
Mhm.
So it doesn't take many. That's what I'm getting from you. So thank you.
Number one, thank you. Number two, we're about to go to take that into this place of what do we do right now to catalyze that consciousness? What do we do right now to move this all forward? And what do we do to release our shadows and embrace the light? And I'm going to spend a few minutes going through what I mean by this. This is a program that I put together 3 years ago. We're about to launch it nationally and globally in the fall. I invite you all to participate. And here we go. So the impetus for the Shadow to Light is, first of all, it was part of the public mass shootings, the theater shootings, the mall shootings, what I call anger-fueled suicide. People are amazingly angry, they're filled with despair, and they go there with the intention of being killed, but they're going to spray a bunch of bullets around and kill a bunch of other people because they're angry. I wrote an article about that, and I'll be glad to share that article with you. I was at a talk, and this is about 4 years ago, in downtown Portland, at City Hall, and it was city workers talking about racism that they were experiencing as city employees. And I got mad. I got really angry because I said, I had this meeting, I had this conversation 40 years ago. 40 years ago. And it hasn't changed. The energy hasn't changed. And it was at that moment I had a revelation. The energy hasn't changed because we haven't changed the energy. We haven't asked for the energy to change. Let's do something about that. The age of Trump. And everybody, I know lots of folks, and maybe even lots of folks in this room, were upset by the election. I thought that I didn't know he was going to get elected, but I thought he really could get elected. Michael Moore was saying for the longest time, you folks are not paying attention.
Right.
I talk to the same people that Michael Moore talks to and I recognize the level of frustration that's out there in the world, and we have to do something about it. The frustration of the left, but it's also the frustration of the right. People don't recognize that Trump did a number on both the left and the right. And I can say more, but I'm not. So the Shadow to Light program that I've got is that we're going to drill deep into our historical, cultural, psychological, and most importantly, spiritual roots. We work at the problem at the root, not at the presenting symptoms. We're used to holding up signs saying down with so-and-so or up with so-and-so, but rather than doing that, let's work with the energy at the level of the energy. This is not a head-centered approach, it's a heart-centered approach. We're not trying to judge others. We're working in what I call the dojo, your training room. We need to work hard. We need to get ourselves sweaty and strong, okay? And this is on a cultural level, on a psychological level, and then on a spiritual level. The antidote to the shadow is ecstasy. And there's this really long quote that I am not going to do. Not because it's not important, but because we don't have time. Okay, so there are 4 shadows and there are 4 corresponding lights. I'm going to do these really quickly. The 4 shadows are the shadow of violence, the shadow of the other, and the shadow of the other manifests itself as racism, sexism, and all other aspects that are based on separation. The shadow of lack, that manifests as poverty on one side, but greed and hoarding on the other side, where people are making millions and billions of dollars, but they're so empty inside that they have to get more, more, more. They're so afraid that somebody's going to take something away from them. And then the shadow of despair that manifests itself as depression and suicide. How many of you have seen my TED Talk? Oh, you should see my TED Talk. But I do an exercise with people, that I have a large group of people, 100 or more, where I will, we as a society focus on the events of 9/11 ad nauseum. It's not that it was, what happened on September 11th, 2001 was horrific, but it's not the only thing that's ever happened to us. And so we spend billions and trillions of dollars dealing with that. So I ask a group of people, if you have 100 people in the room or 200 people, if you were affected by the events of September 11th, if you know someone personally who was killed or injured on September 11th, 2001, in the World Trade Center, in the Pentagon, or in any of the flights that crashed, I asked them to stand up in the room. And with 100 people, I usually get 3 or 4 people standing up. I then ask, if you know someone who has committed suicide or attempted suicide by name, even if that person is yourself, I ask them to stand up, and almost the entire room stands up. I'll get 4 or 5 people who don't stand up. Suicide is and it happens every room I've ever been in. Suicide is at an epidemic level, and we won't do anything about it. None of the political candidates say anything about it. This is the failure of the right and the failure of the left. We can't expect the left or the right to respond to a different worldview. It's our job to do that. Okay, so we're replacing these 4 shadows with the 4 lights. And what are the 4 lights? The light of peace and security is the antidote to the shadow of violence. The light of inclusive community is the antidote to the shadow of the other. The light of abundance and enoughness is the antidote to the shadow of lack. And the light of deep fulfillment is the antidote to the shadow of despair. Imagine what America would be like if the shadow is lifted. Imagine what happens when the trillions of dollars that we waste making more bombs and more airplanes, etc., is released as creative energy into our own society. So here's the shadow energy release process. It's based on the battle energy release process of Michelle Small-Wright. I made a shift of that, I call the slavery energy release process. This stuff actually works. I can say more about that, but I'd be taking up my own time. How many of you are familiar with the citywide meditation experiment that TM did, Transcendental Meditation did some years ago? They went to Washington, D.C. with the intention of lowering the homicide rate by 25%. The police chief of Washington, D.C. said the only thing that would lower the homicide rate by 25% in August in Washington, D.C. is a snowstorm. And they lowered the rate. We've already talked about Kessler and the baby chicks experiment. We can move this energy. We're not going to talk about the Princeton egg experiment. That's just too bad. And how many, we all know about the 12 steps approach to Alcoholics Anonymous and the other addictive substance removal energies. Take all those abilities, smush them together, and make a program out of it. So what is the shadow? The shadow is simply the stuff that we fear. The shadow can be fear itself. The shadows are produced by something that actually blocks the light. So if you see a shadow, what you should be looking for is what's blocking the light. There are a couple of effects of the shadow. On the personal level, the shadow keeps us small and unenlightened. It keeps us from perceiving our reality. It magnifies our fears. It's not that the fears aren't there. It's just that we make them seem bigger than they are. It keeps us away from our greatness. It's ultimately self-destructive. It makes us very angry and disempowered. And we can get very depressed and numb from the existence of shadows. All that happens when you carry our collective shadow around personally. What happens on a societal level is we create a society that's based on fears and insecurities. Have you ever, think about where we live right now. A society that perpetuates injustice because it's afraid. A society that is fundamentally unsustainable. And a society that is immoral. And this is language I want to reintroduce into our society. That this is outside of our behavior is outside of our spiritual, our spiritual good. And we need to just start saying this is something that we be acting in an immoral way. It's a society that is mindless. That we have a society that television, okay, and a society that is ultimately suicidal. I'm going to skip the rest of this. Okay. So, starting in fall of 2017, I'm going to be working with 100 Unity churches. I'm looking at creating partnerships with IONS community groups and others. What we're going to do is train and certify local catalysts, people who get the shadow to light methodology to facilitate shadow to light energy work in those areas. That we be conducting shadow to light energy shifting events once a week for 12 weeks. And if there's still some shadow left over, we'll repeat that process in spring of 2018. Instead of 100 churches, have 200 churches. Without anything in writing, having nothing other than what I just said. We've had 7 churches already sign up and say, we want to be part of this. This is what I'm presenting to the at the Unity Convention in San Antonio in 3 weeks. So I'm going to have something in writing by then. And this is the thing that all of us can get involved in. This is the thing that all of us can actually do do some connecting in. That we can start connecting with ourselves, start connecting with our neighbors, start connecting with the other to bring about a fundamental change in our society. Asking the question of what we do with regard to things like global warming. Global warming will change as soon as we simply ask for it to change. All the carbon will come out of the sky simply because we ask it. Simply because we, as the representatives of humanity, with a critical mass of us, and I don't know how big a critical mass is, but with a critical mass of us, that we will say to the earth, we're sorry. We're sorry we put the carbon up there in the first place. We'll do something about that. We're not going to put up any more. Will you please let that come down? And it will come down.
We're not gonna do that anymore, is the hard part, right?
Ta-da! You just happen to pick out the I'm sorry part. Yes, Yeah, we have that as soon as we do this musical interlude, as soon as we do this, we recognize what our task has to be. Our task has to be that we get big enough to change the systems and structures of our own society, to allow them to change, to allow us to get to have a completely new way of looking at the world, so that my friend in the back will be living in a profoundly different society. One story on profundity, then I'm going to read a quote to you from my book, and then we'll be officially done. We can stay here for a little bit of Q&A. My book was, the introduction to my book was provided by Václav Havel when he was the president of the Czech Republic. And Havel told a story of when he was in a Soviet prison, and in prison because of his political beliefs. His job was pushing the laundry carts around. And he saw another prisoner that he didn't know had been arrested for his political beliefs. And so they see each other, and they have 5 minutes they can talk to each other before the guards come and break them up. So what do they talk about for 5 minutes? What we would talk about is how bad the administration is. What we would talk about is how much they miss their wives. What we would talk about is how lousy the food is. What we would do for 5 minutes is complain. What they did for 5 minutes was talk about the nature of the society that they would create when they got out. Havel was taken out of the prison, dusted off, put a tie on him, and was made the president of the country. The other guy was taken out of the prison, dusted off, they put a tie on him, and he was the foreign secretary. So I ask each and every one of us, are you ready to be the president or the foreign secretary of our next country? If this one is unsustainable, let's just do another one. You know, this is the third government we've had. You know, let's just keep going until we get it right. There's nothing sacred about the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson said the Constitution should be rewritten every 20 years. He said every generation should rewrite the Constitution. We are 220 some odd years overdue. And that has to be a Constitution that works for us all. That doesn't mean creating a world that works for me and my friends, or creating a world that works for the people I like. It really honestly means creating a world that works for all beings, and I believe that we can do it. Okay, so I'm going to read a quote, if I can find one. I think I'll read this one, if I can find that one. Okay. This is, both of these quotes are both of my ending quotes are from a Brazilian theologian by the name of Rubem Alves. And he's talking about planting date trees. He says, let us learn from those who plant dates. A date tree takes 80 years from the time it is planted to bear its first fruit. To plant a date tree is an act of faith, a sign of hope, and a symbol of one's loving commitment to the future. Let us plant dates, even though we who plant them will never eat them. We must live by the love of what we will never see. This is the secret discipline. It is a refusal to let our creative act be dissolved away in immediate sense experience, and is a stubborn commitment to the future of our grandchildren. Such disciplined love, I'm going to repeat that part, such disciplined love is what has given prophets, revolutionaries, and saints the courage to die for the future they envisioned. They make their own bodies the seed of their highest hopes. Each and every one of us is a seed. Most of us, many of us, have been afraid to be cracked open, have been afraid to soak up the nutrients, and have been afraid to stick our heads out and say, okay, it's time to absorb the light and it's time to shine. But it's time. But I think that we now recognize we don't have the luxury of that fear anymore. And so it's time for us to wake up. And on the journey, I wish us all well. So, thank you.
Thank you.
And